وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. इंशाअल्लाह आज हम कोशिश करेंगे सैयदना उमर रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु के बारे में हमने जो शुरू किया है, उनकी जो है तारीख़ और उनकी बायोग्राफी के बारे में we will attempt to complete today inshaAllah ta'ala, and if we do not, then we will complete it whenever we get an opportunity, if tomorrow, if not tomorrow, then next week inshaAllah ta'ala. In the Khilafah of Sayyiduna Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and many of the prophecies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they came true. जो रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने मुसलमान को बताया था कि ऐसा ऐसा होने वाला है. In this regard, it was in the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and for example, that Suraqa bin Malik, he was given the gold bangles, the bracelets of Khusru of the Persian Empire. The leader of the Persian Empire, they would have these gold bracelets which they would take great pride in. And when Suraqa bin Malik, he was chasing after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the miracle became manifest in front of him, when his horse kept going into the ground, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a peace treaty with him, a contract with him. And at that time he had prophesied that he would be given these gold bracelets. And it was in the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and when this came to light, because it was during his period that the Islamic Empire, it grew so vast and so wide that the lands of Damascus and Sham, the lands of Egypt, the lands of Persia, all of them came under the control of the Muslims. Yahan tak ke Sindh ke jo Malik hai, all the way to the western parts of Pakistan, Indus River, the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and it reached. And I have some beautiful maps, inshaAllah ta'ala, which if I get an opportunity I will share with you, of how the Islamic Khilafah is spread during the respective Khulafa. One of the most amazing incidents was when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he would receive the keys of Al-Quds Sharif, Jerusalem. Because that one incident, it encompasses the character of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. These were blessed lands. वो ज़मीन पे जिसमें रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने अंबिया अलैहिमुस्सलाम की इमामत की, जहाँ कई अंबिया अलैहिमुस्सलाम आराम फरमा रहे हैं. As the Muslims, they were marching forward with their armies, they got to a point where Jerusalem was surrounded by Muslims. On one side you had armies under the leadership of Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah. On the other side you had armies under the command of the likes of Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid. You had Egypt under the control of people like Amr ibn al-As. And so the people in Jerusalem, they didn't know what to do. And they were really worried, because from a historical perspective, when the Persians took over this land, at one point the Persians, they were so dominant over the Romans, they took over Jerusalem, they killed almost 100,000 people. They stole what they call the true cross, they damaged their churches, they completely decimated the area. It was the Roman general Heraclius who would then give strength to the Byzantines, and he would launch an offensive, and that which was prophesied in the Quran, he would be able to take back large amounts of land, bring back the true cross, and push out the Persians from Jerusalem. And by the way, during this entire process, the Jewish people, they sided with the Persian Empire because they were persecuted by the Christians. So when the Christians, they regained control of Jerusalem, they expelled the Jewish people from that holy site and from that area. Not only this, लेकिन वो जो ज़मीन है al-Aqsa Sharif, al-Quds Sharif, Baytul Maqdis, they turned that into the dump yard of the city. They would throw rubbish there. जब लोग इंतकाल कर जाते तो उनकी जो लाशें थी वहाँ रखते. And so it was completely defiled and it was not taken care of, because remember, that area doesn't mean anything to the Christians. The Jews and the Muslims, it is sacred to them. But for the Christians, they had no concern with that. So as the Muslims are on the outskirts of the city, they don't want to enter. इसलिए कि अगर वो दाखिल हो गए तो शायद लोग जो है they would oppose them, वो मुखालिफत करे. It could lead to fighting, it could lead to bloodshed in the holy city. And so they mentioned some 4 months the Muslims, they waited. उन्होंने इंतजार किया कि देखते हैं कि if they surrender. Eventually the patriarch Sophronius, he says that we are happy to sign a treaty with you, कि आपके साथ सुलह करने के लिए हम तैयार हैं, लेकिन कुछ शराइत है, और उनमें से ये एक शर्त है कि आपके जो खलीफा है उमर, वो खुद आए, he comes himself to take the keys of Jerusalem. So the Muslims, they were like, what is this? And how can we concede to these kinds of requests and demands? Eventually they send a letter. Sayyiduna Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he never used to leave the city of Madinatul Munawwara. He loved the city of Madinatul Munawwara. He wanted to die in the city of Madinatul Munawwara. But this is a very important issue, so he brings the people, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali and various companions. He begins to consult with them. Some of them, they say that this is a trap, this is a trick, you can't leave, maybe they will ambush you, aisa hoga. But Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, and he says that Amir al-Mu'mineen, ये जो जगह है बहुत अहमियत वाली जगह है, very important place. और ये जो नसारा है वो कह रहे हैं कि उनकी किताब में ये लिखा है कि there will be a particular person who will take the keys and so on and so forth. So I think that you should go. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he agrees and he decides to leave. Now you can imagine he's the leader of all of the believers, one of the most powerful men at that time. If it was in our times, they would have a full motorcade. But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala was so amazing. When he leaves from the city of Madinatul Munawwara, it's him and one servant, just the two of them. और जब लोग कोशिश करते हैं साथ आने को, like, we'll come with you, and he says to them, no. And so they have one camel, and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he makes an agreement with his servant Aslam कि ऐसा होगा कि हम जो है बारी बारी ऊन पर सवार होंगे, यासीन शरीफ की तिलावत करेंगे. जैसे ही यासीन शरीफ की तिलावत मुकम्मल हुई तो वो फिर नीचे उतरेगा और दूसरा आदमी वो उन पर सवार होगा. We will take turns like this. This is his servant, but look at how in justice he's showing to you, how much mercy he's showing. And so like this they take turns going in the direction of the sacred city of Masjid Al Aqsa. And as they are traveling, they are taking turns to get on and off the camel. They get close to the area of Baytul Maqdis. And who does he see? He begins to meet the companions, the likes of Yazid bin Abi Sufyan, and the likes of Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, and Amr ibn al-As. And what Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he sees, it upsets him. क्या देखते हैं कि they're wearing silk, not on their bodies per se, but they're covering their horses in silk, and maybe they have certain garments which are made out of this material. आप जानते हैं कि ये मुसलमान के लिए नाजायज़ है, लेकिन जिहाद की हालत में there are some exemptions. So he gets so angry, he begins to throw stones at them and says, 2 years you are away, and look, you have already changed. If this had happened 200 years after you had left from me, even then I would have removed you from your positions and I would have replaced you with somebody else. सिर्फ 2 साल में आप लोग बदल गए. तो सहाबा किराम अर्ज करते हैं, ए अमीर अल-मुमिनीन, असल बात यह है कि हम अभी भी जिहाद की हालत में ही हैं. We have our weapons with me, we have covered them in these silk brocades. Just in case that they do some treachery, we're ready to fight. तो सैयदना उमर रदियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु वो मान गए. लेकिन फिर जब उन्होंने सैयदना उमर रदियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु की तरफ देखा, when they looked towards सैयदना उमर रदियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु, यानी the person who is their leader, who people, when they hear the name of Umar, they are quaking, they are shaking. But yet when they look at their Amir, what is his situation? He's donning 2 garments, 2 white sheets, 17 patches on his clothing. And not only this, as he was coming, he had to cross through a muddy puddle, which pani tha, और उसके लिए, because of this, उनके जो खुफ थे, his leather socks, he had to remove them and he was holding them. So imagine this situation, you got this person who is the superpower of this time, and he's the leader of that. And he's donning 2 simple white garments, 17 patches on those garments, with his leather socks in his hands, covered in mud and in dust. And that too, he's holding the reins of the camel, and his servant is riding upon the camel. Because as they were approaching the city, Aslam the servant, he said that Amir al-Mu'mineen, ab hum kareeb aa chuke hai, to aap jo hai sawar ho jaye, aapne jo kiya hai, I cannot even thank you enough, the mercy you have shown for me. But now we are getting close, you should be the one that's riding upon the camel. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he says, no, we agreed. And the agreement we had was 50-50, it is your turn, you will ride upon the camel. And so they're pushing him, and they're saying change your clothes and so on and so forth. And in the entire biography of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, if we do not remember any words except for these words, then this will be sufficient for us. He said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are a people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He honored us, He gave us izzah through Islam. We are a people, we were disgraced, we were humiliated. If Allah gave us honor, He gave it us through Islam. If today we seek honor through anything other than Islam, then we will be destroyed, we will be dishonored. Today, my dear brothers, we are so embarrassed of our Islam. Many of us, we have adopted completely, we have rolled over in Western culture. In every sense of the word. We are embarrassed to follow in the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But when Sayyidina Umar enters into the city, and the patriarch Sophronius, and he sees this man with his humility, his simplicity, at that time he sees that whoever is led by a man like this, they will never be defeated. And this is exactly what it was the case. In the Khilafah of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and you will be hard pressed to find a battle in which the Muslims were defeated. A battle in which the Muslims, they had to lower their flag. A battle in which the Muslims, they fled from the battlefield. Even though they were less in numbers, even though they didn't have the same military capabilities, even though maybe they were not as well organized, but yet the Muslims, they attained success after success after success. Because of the leadership, because they had the likes of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala at the helm. They begin and they enter into a discussion. The patriarch, he mentions his conditions and so on and so forth. He says, this is what we would like. And these become known as Shuruti Umariya, you can find them. Was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and agreed that if you pay the jizya, then you will be promised protection. Your churches will not be harmed, your crosses will not be broken, you will be protected by the Muslim army, you do not have to serve in the Muslim army. And he made all of these conditions with them. He relocated some of those Jewish family members who had been exiled, he allowed them to come back in, he allowed them back into their places of worship. When Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, the patriarch, he was so impressed by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where they used to keep the true cross. He gave the keys of this church to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. As he was giving the keys to the city, he gave the keys to the church as well to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he took the keys and he gave them to one of his companions. And he said, it is your responsibility to now open and close this church, to take care of it. And look at this, look at the trustworthiness of the Muslims. That these keys, they were passed down from generation to generation, from father to son to son, like this, until even today, those very keys, The keys to one of the holiest sites for Christianity, they are in the hands of a Muslim even today. Even today, a Muslim, they go in the morning, they open the church for the Christians, and in the evening they lock the door as well. This is how trustworthy they were. You know, if you look at the Crusades, you look at what the Christians did, what the Jewish people did when they took over Muslim lands, the Muslims were completely different in their approach. And so at this point, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he asks Sayyidina Ka'b ibn al-Ahbar, who's one of the people, he was a priest, a Jewish priest, and later he would accept Islam. He says, show me the place where Rasulullah led the namaz. वो जगह जहाँ रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने इसरा और मिराज की रात अंबिया अलैहिस्सलाम की इमामत की, वो जगह में देखना चाहता हूँ. So they took him to the lands of Bayt al-Maqdis, the sacred lands, and they looked at it and it was just a tip. सब कचरा वहाँ रखा हुआ था. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala ne khud, he rolls up his sleeves and he begins to clean that area. He begins to lift the stuff up with his own hands. And once they have finished cleaning that area, they begin to try and locate the place where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he led the prayer, he led the namaz. And once they are able to locate that place, the companions together, they perform namaz in those sacred lands. Yani not only was this the gathering place of the Anbiya alayhimus salam, but those companions, they prayed namaz behind Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and on those very sacred lands. This is the importance of this place. In that area today, they built a masjid, as you know, Qibli Mosque. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and when he was going to pray, they offered him to pray in the courtyard of the church of Saplika. The patriarch, he was so happy with Sayyidina Umar, he was so impressed. कि जब नमाज का वक्त आया था तो कहा कि यहाँ ही आप पढ़ ले. उनकी जो church थी वहाँ in the courtyard, he said, just pray namaz here, no problem. But look at the wisdom of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And he said, I will not pray here. क्योंकि अगर मैंने यहाँ नमाज अदा की तो एक वक्त ऐसा भी आएगा कि मुसलमान कहेंगे कि उमर रदियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु ने नमाज यहाँ अदा की तो अब ये मस्जिद बन जाएगी. We will make a masjid on this place. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he went down a short distance and he prayed the namaz there. And he was exactly right, because what did the Muslims do where he prayed namaz? Today there is a masjid which is called Masjid Umar. They built a masjid and they named it after him, Umar radiallahu ta'ala. In this manner, these sacred lands, they came under the control of the Muslims. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he showed the true justice of Islam. And this is why Hurmuzan, you know Hurmuzan, the Muslims, they had a lot of enmity towards him. He was one of the Persian generals. He broke the peace treaty with the Muslims numerous times. When he was brought, and he had his crown and his silk brocade and all of his fancy stuff, and he was brought, and he asked, where is Umar radiallahu ta'ala? And what does he see? The leader of the Muslims, the most powerful person at that time. And he's lying down on the floor in Masjid Nabawi, on a straw mat, such that the straw mat is leaving marks in his body. They say many a time, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he would just sleep in the middle of in the open space. And he would take a brick, and the brick would be his pillow. In the middle of the day, there would be a pool of sweat around him. But he had no fear at all. When Hurmuzan, when he saw this, he was shocked. He starts asking the companions, Sahab se puchta hai ke, where is his bodyguards? Where is his protection? Where is his sentinels? And they say, no, Amir al-Mu'mineen doesn't have nothing like this. And he said those beautiful words. He said, Hakamta wa adalta fa aminta fa nimta. That you ruled and you were just. And because you were just, you were safe. You had no fear. And so you slept like this out in the open without a single concern or a single worry. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala is a role model for every single leader. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, in his khilafah, he achieved so much. But the khilafah was spreading, and so on a particular year, the final year that he would perform Hajj, because Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he would go for Hajj every single year. As he was returning, he sat down, resting upon his camel, And he said, "Oh Allah, my age has increased. Umar bar chuki hai, and I have become weak, kamzor hu, and the ummah has spread far and wide. The Khilafah has extended so much. So, oh Allah, return me back to you in a state where you are pleased with me." ऐसा नहीं चाहता हूँ कि मेरी खिलाफत जो है, it keeps going on, the Islamic empire, it spreads far and wide, और मुझसे कोई ऐसा अमल हो जाए जो गुनाह हो या खता हो, something like this. I make a mistake in your court and I return to you in a state where you are angry with me, O Allah. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he would make this dua, he would return back, he would perform one khutbah, and before this he would be martyred, he would be killed. Now what's interesting is Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he used to always make this one particular dua, a dua which we make sometimes as well. Allahumma rzuqni shahadatan fi sabilik waj'al mawti fi baladi rasulik sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. O Allah, give me shahada in your path and give me death in the city of your beloved. And his daughter Sayyidah Hafsa used to say to him, that father, you make this dua, but it makes no sense. How can you be martyred in the city of Madinatul Munawwara? Who's going to kill you in Madinatul Munawwara? Everyone loves you, everyone respects you. But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he would make this dua because it wasn't impossible and he had true faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another dua he used to always make, "O Allah, let my death not come at the hands of a person who has done even one sajda towards you." Meaning, let it not be at the hands of a Muslim. Why? Because he used to say, if I was killed by a Muslim, maybe on the day of judgment he brings me in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he argues a case against me. And he was so afraid. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and as the incident transpires, he wouldn't allow war captives to be in Madinatul Munawwara, because Madinatul Munawwara was the center of the Khilafah. If they rebelled, it would cause serious problems. But Mughira ibn Shu'bah, one of the companions of Rasulullah, the governor of Kufa, he had one particular war captive. He was Majusi, a fire worshipper. His name was Fayruz, his kunya was Abu Lu'lu'ah. He was a very, very intelligent individual. He was a blacksmith, he was an engraver, he was a carpenter. And so he requested, he said, "Amir al-Mu'mineen, I would like to send this individual because you can utilize him. He can make things which will benefit the Muslims." So Sayyidina Umar, he agreed. Mughira bin Shu'bah, he had a tax levied upon him, 100 dirhams a month. Abu Lu'lu'ah, he goes to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he says that the tax that Mughira bin Shu'bah he is charging, it is very high. It's very difficult for me to pay. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he looked at his situation, how much money he was earning with his profession, and he says, this is reasonable. And it's not too much. So Abu Lu'lu'ah, he got angry. In reality, what Sayyidina Umar was doing, look at how he deals with it. He says to Abu Lu'lu'ah, it's okay. What your master is telling you to do, listen to what he's saying. But at the same time, he's writing to Sayyidina Mughira bin Shu'bah and he's saying, have mercy upon your servant. Don't charge him more than he needs. Don't charge him more than he can handle. But Abu Lu'lu'ah, from that point forward, he got angry and he placed it into his head that he was going to kill Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. One day Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he called him and he said, I heard that you know how to make windmill. You can make a mill which works off the wind and it can grind flour. So at that point, Abu Lu'lu'ah, he said, I will make you a windmill which the world will talk about, which everybody will remember. When he said these words, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he started laughing and he said to the companions, he's just threatened to kill me. So companions, they said, that's fine, we'll arrest him, we'll kill him. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala said, no, because this is based upon what? A dhann. This suspicion. If you do this today, tomorrow, the leaders that will come after me, as soon as they are a little bit doubtful about somebody, agar koi shak ya guman kisi ke bare mein aa gaya, to unko qatl kar de. They'll kill them. So he says, no, you will not do this. Now Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he enters into Masjid Nabawi. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, his martyrdom was already foretold. Rasulullah on Mount Uhud, what did he say when the mountain began to shake? He stamped his feet and he said, Uthbut ya Uhud, be firm O Uhud, because upon you is Nabi and Siddiq and 2 shaheeds. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he was already aware. Rasulullah had already informed him, said Aisha had seen a dream in which 3 moons had come into her room. When she asked her father what the interpretation was, her father had said that 3 of the best people will be buried in your hujrah. And when Rasulullah passed away and he was buried in that room, Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, this is the first and the best of those moons. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he was also buried there. So all of this was coming. He already had these ideas. Sayyid Abu Musa al-Ashari, he saw one of the most beautiful dreams. He saw in his dreams that things were disappearing. All these good things like horses and camels, they were disappearing. And then all of a sudden he's walking and he's on top of a mountain and Rasulullah is there and Abu Bakr is there. And there's a gap between him and Umar radiallahu ta'ala an. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, he's looking towards Rasulullah and Rasulullah is looking towards Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an. And he's saying, "Oh Umar, come towards me. Come to me, O Umar." So all of this, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, he was already aware that this was his destiny. It had already been written for him. He was making dua that he would be given death as a martyr. The hadith, that there was a lock on the door of fitna. And all of the companions, they knew that the lock on that door was who? Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And when he asked that will the lock be open, will it be broken? They said, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Rasulullah said, the lock will be broken. And he said, it is most fitting that the lock is broken. That if I am the one who is stopping the fitna, then it should be that I should be martyred, not that I should die. That this door should only be open by force, not by somebody's willingness. In that last khutbah, what did Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and he say? He said that I saw a dream. In the dream, I saw a rooster, a cockerel, a big chicken, and that it had pecked me numerous times. He says, what's the interpretation of the dream? And the people, they said, Amir al-Mu'mineen, that you will be martyred. You are going to be killed very soon. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and one day, as he was entering the Fajr namaz, he would straighten the rows, the saf. Abu Lu'lu'a, he hid. He came to Fajr namaz because it used to be dark at that time. People wouldn't be able to recognize him. He had with him a dagger which he had sharpened on both sides and he had laced it with poison. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and he began the Fajr namaz. His practice was he would recite Surah Yusuf and Surah Nahl. As he was leading the namaz, the companions, they say that Sayyidina Umar was crying profusely. He was crying a lot. As he was leading namaz, Abu Lu'lu'a, he took the dagger and he stabbed Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala and numerous times. At least 3 times he stabbed Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. He stabbed him in the shoulder, he stabbed him in the side, and then when Sayyidina Umar, he turned around, he stabbed him in the stomach, and that was the worst one. It went all the way through into his stomach. The companions, they tried to grab hold of him, but as he was fighting, in the process, he injured 13 companions, and of those 13, 7 of them, they were martyred. Eventually, one of them, they took a massive cloak, they placed it over him. और जैसे कि उसको मालूम हो गया कि मैं यहाँ से नहीं निकलने वाला हूँ, then he took his own life. He stabbed himself in the chest 3 times, and this way he was killed. Now look, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and he's been stabbed. Those wounds which will lead to his death. As the companions are coming to check on him, he grabs hold of Sayyidina Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, and he could say anything at this point, but what does he say? He says the namaz is not finished. He says, get up and finish the namaz. He says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, you've been stabbed. And he says, no, finish the namaz. So Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, he says, I stood. I quickly led the people in prayer. I prayed 2 short units. When we came and we finished, we saw that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, they were carrying him back to the house of his son. He was unconscious. He had lost consciousness. They were trying to wake him up. They were saying his name, so on and so forth, but he's not waking up. Eventually, when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he wakes up from his coma after some time, a little bit of time passes. The first thing he asks He didn't say, what's the situation? Am I going to die? Nothing like this. The first thing he asks is, did you pray the namaz? Was the namaz performed? They say, yes, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Abdul Rahman, he performed the prayer. And he says, that's good, excellent, because there is no share of Islam. After Ramadan, in Ramadan, it's easy to pray namaz. I want you to think about this, my dear brothers. He says, there's no share of Islam for the person who does not perform his namaz. Islam का कोई हिस्सा ही नहीं है उसके लिए जो नमाज नहीं अदा करता है वक्त पे. Now they ask, Sayyidina Umar, he asks for some water. लोग सोचते हैं कि शायद he's thirsty, he wants to drink water, but when they give him the water, what does he do? He begins to perform wudu. And after he has performed his wudu, he performs his Fajr namaz. The doctor, they come to check on him, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, in order to check, they give him some water, some nabeez to drink, some milk to drink, and what do they see? That as he is drinking the water and the milk, it's coming out of his wounds. So they determine, they say, Amir al-Mu'mineen, this seems like your final illness. We don't think that you're going to survive past this. So whatever will you want to make sure you make that will. Now Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he brings his family and he says that I have some outstanding debts. Kuch qarz hai jo baki hai, usko mukammal karna hai. Remember, he's the Khalifa of the believers and he's in debt. So he says, first and foremost, you need to pay it. If you can't pay it, then the Banu Adi needs to pay it. If they can't pay it, then the Quraysh needs to pay it. And number two, I want you to go to Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa radiallahu ta'ala anha. And I want you to say Umar bin Khattab. Don't say Amir al-Mu'mineen. Don't pressure her. Say Umar bin Khattab. He is asking that if you would give permission, then he would like to be buried next to his two best friends. When Abdullah bin Umar, he enters on Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa, they say Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa was crying more than when Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, her own father, had passed away. They said, why are you crying so much? And she said that Rasulullah had said that Umar was a lock on the door of fitna. And now that he has been killed, then the fitna will spread upon the ummah. They said, Sayyidina Umar, he's requesting this. Now look at the sacrifice of Sayyidah Aisha Siddiqa. She said, I had saved that spot for myself. I have saved that spot for myself. But there is no one who is as worthy as Umar radiallahu ta'ala. So I'm happy to sacrifice this for him. When Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar, he came back, he gave the glad tidings to Sayyidina Umar. But look at this justice. He says, that's fine, she's agreed, but maybe she's emotional. So before I am buried, go back to her and ask her again. If she agrees, then bury me in that place. But if she does not agree, then bury me in Baqi with the rest of the Muslims. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, if this was just his life, this would be enough for us to recognize him as such a great man. But what he does next in his final moments, when I read this, it brought tears to my eyes. His head was on the lap of his son Abdullah bin Umar. He says, my son, place my cheek onto the ground. Sar ko zameen pe rakhe. And he says, Father, why? And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and the person who had been promised Jannah, the person whom Rasulullah said he's the lamp for the people of Jannah. If there was a prophet after me, it would have been Umar, whom the Prophet saw dreams about. He said that maybe when my Lord sees my head in the dirt, he will have mercy upon Umar and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him. Maybe when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees his servant with his head on the ground in the dirt, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have mercy upon Umar and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive him. And so in this manner, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reciting the verses of the Quran, he leaves from this world. He's taken, he's buried next to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If the shoulder of Sayyidina Abu Bakr is in line, the head of Sayyidina Abu Bakr is in line with the shoulder of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the head of Sayyidina Umar is in line with the shoulder of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. As they're carrying him towards that, they hear somebody reciting a eulogy, a poem. And when they turn to look, who is it? It's Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. And what's he saying? Sayyidina Ali is saying that there is no one whose book of deeds I would be more happier to stand in front of Allah. Like if I had to stand in front of Allah with someone's book of deeds, then there is no one except for Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And he says, I am so happy today that Sayyidina Umar is being buried with Sayyidina Rasulullah and Abu Bakr, because I used to hear Rasulullah always say, me and Abu Bakr and Umar, we went to this place. Me, Abu Bakr and Umar, we were in this person's house. Me, Abu Bakr and Umar, we heard such and such a person say this. And today, it is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, and Umar radiallahu ta'ala. Sayyidina Zainul Abidin, the great grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the grandson of Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala, and he was asked, what is the position, or what was the position of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And the Imam of the Ahl Bayt, the answer he gave was such a beautiful answer. He said, the position you asked me about, the position of Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he says their position with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then is like their position right now. Meaning right now, who is the closest to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this entire earth? Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And their closeness is such that on the Day of Judgment, when you and I, we come out of our graves, and if you are blessed with the vision of seeing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then what will we see? We will see that in the right hand he has Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, and his left hand he has Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. And these are the luminaries who passed before us. They gave such beautiful examples for us to follow. If we do not learn about them, if we don't walk in their footsteps, if we don't defend them when they are insulted, then the question is, who are we in the face of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? What type of Muslims are we? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us such amazing personalities to follow, that even non-Muslims, they acknowledge the accomplishments of Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala. So we make dua inshaAllah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to benefit from the lives of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, following the footsteps of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman and Ali radiallahu ta'ala alayhim ajma'een. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise us on the day of judgment in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the company of his companions. May we be blessed with a place in Jannah next to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for our major and minor sins. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us in this life and in the hereafter. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.